So, hey, we're continuing our journey through Revelation and looking at Revelation 4 and 5 today. And if you'll remember what we've done so far is we've done Revelation 1, what's kind of this introduction, where we see that John is exiled on Patmos, and he's given this vision. He's given a vision that he's going to write down. He's going to deliver to 7 churches. There's 7 churches in Asia Minor, and in chapters 2 and 3, those churches get short little individual letters that are more specific to their context. So now in chapter 4, we get into the weird stuff, right? The visions that John has. Now, and we'll remember that these are still meant for these 7 churches, right? So 2 and 3 gave us the context, and this is kind of the answer, okay? Or this is, these visions are meant to respond to some of that context there. So chapter 4 and 5, we're getting into this throne room scene. So it is a really similar passage to like Ezekiel 1 or Isaiah 6, where these prophets are seeing visions of God on his throne. And so they're going to borrow a lot of language there. And just kind of a reminder, remember something we read in Revelation 1, blessed is the one who reads these words out loud. That a big part of Revelation, this is meant to be read aloud in church. This is meant to be a book for worship. So no secret why the first big image in Revelation 4 is God on his throne, is completely centered on worship. And worship is a key theme throughout the chapters we're looking at tonight, or chapter 4 and 5. So we're just going to start now and just go through, starting 4 and just go right through 5. So starting in 4:1, after the letters, it says this. After this, I looked up, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice, which I heard speaking to me, came like a trumpet, and said, come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this. At once I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne stood in heaven, and one seated on the throne. And he sat there, and he who sat there had the appearance of jasper and carnelian, and around the throne was a rainbow that had the appearance of an emerald. So there's this open door. Ezekiel 1:1 has kind of similar, or Ezekiel 1 somewhere has like similar language. So like an open door kind of is this image of this revelation, this special vision that you're going to get. And John is getting this open door and this picture into the throne room of God. So we see that there is one seated on the throne, and you don't have to tell us who that is, right? So we're seeing Yahweh, God, on his throne, and he's described as having the appearance of jasper and carnelian, and around the throne there's a rainbow and emerald. So it's this glorious picture, this glorious kind of being that you're looking at. It's awe-inspiring. And that's just the first picture we get. Glorious figure on his throne. Verse 4. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders, clothed in white garments, with golden crowns on their heads. From the throne came flashes of lightning and rumblings and pearls of thunder, and before the throne were burning 7 torches of fire, which are the 7 spirits of God. Before the throne there was, as it were, a sea of glass like crystal. Okay, stop there. So the first characters we see here are these 24 elders, 24 on their 24 thrones with their crowns and their white garments. So there are a few different interpretations of how we can understand this. All of those interpretations, or most of those interpretations, lead to this being symbolic for all Christians, for all around over all periods of time. And maybe it's, the symbolic number comes from the 12 tribes of Israel plus the 12 apostles, making 24. I think a better interpretation is looking at 1 Chronicles 24, where there are 24 houses of priests. So from the sons of Eleazar and the sons of, there's another name that starts with I, but there are these 24 houses of priests, and we're going to see that some language used here is that God has made us, that, or through the lamb sacrifice, that we've been made a kingdom of priests. So when we see these people dressed in white, which is kind of, we've seen an image for like victory and an image of like overcoming and purity, but also that language that being clothed in white is also kind of used for priestly garments, priestly idea. So I think a good way to think about this is these are believers. This is the priesthood of all believers, symbolically gathered around the throne with their crowns. Right, we're co-reigning. We've seen that even already in the letters that believers will reign with Christ. So I think that's kind of what this is getting at here. We also see from the throne there's flashes of lightning, rumbling, pearls of thunder. This is the same language they used in Exodus at Sinai. So right when God shows up, there's this power and there's this uncontrollable thing that is kind of this transcendent power is what I'm getting at. And I think that's the image here. So you have this, it's glorious, but it's a little scary. And it is a powerful image here. And before the throne, there as it was a sea of glass like crystal. Sea of glass, a few different interpretations there too. So I promise there are a lot of these kind of here at the beginning, but we're going to get more into larger swaths of the text. But good understanding of the sea of glass. What we're going to see throughout the book is that heaven is modeled after the temple, or maybe a better way to say it is the temple of God is modeled after heaven. We're going to see the measurements of the temple later in Revelation and the things that are included in the temple. And it is, it's like a tiny little version, or the temple is a tiny little version of heaven. And there's this sea is the language that's used in the Old Testament that for where the priests would purify themselves. And there's this sea of glass. So I think that's kind of we're already starting to see that imagery where the place where God dwells, the temple, heaven is the big temple where God fully dwells in all his power. So those are our first kind of characters, those 24 elders, and now we are getting into some more weird characters here. And we're going to roll through the rest of the chapter right here. And around the throne, on each side of the throne, are 4 living creatures, full of eyes on front and behind. The first living creature like a lion, the second living creature like an ox, the third living creature with the face of a man, and the fourth living creature like an eagle in flight. And the 4 living creatures, each of them had 6 wings and are covered, are full of eyes all around them and within. And day and night, they never cease to say, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come." So we have these 4 living creatures, it says, and these are similar kind of images we see in Ezekiel 1, right, and Isaiah 6. So there's some different ways to kind of understand this. Like when we see that number 4, right, all these numbers we're going to see in Revelation are symbolic of different things. And 4 is often kind of like 7 in that it's a number of like completion, because we'll see like the 4 winds later and things that often have to do with like direction. It's like there are 4 directions, right? North, south, east, west. So when we talk about 4 of something, we're talking about the whole completion of, in this case, it's like creatures, the animal kingdom, right? You have the lion, you have like an ox, you have like lion, maybe some people say like lion, kind of wild animals, ox, more domesticated animals, you have man, and then you have an eagle, so like a bird. So that kind of encompasses like the whole animal kingdom, and really all creation. So it's again, kind of like how the 24 elders are this picture of all believers all time, our priesthood of believers. This is kind of 4 living creatures. It's like all creation is worshiping God, and they're singing the song, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come." So that word Almighty is interesting. Greek, I'd have to have it written down. It's Akator, no. So there was a word used for Caesar at the time, Akator, meaning like mighty, right? Common word that would be used to describe Caesar. And in this case, God is described as Almighty, Pan Akator. So why, this is kind of zooming out, why first image is this vision of God on his throne. If we talked about this group of churches is persecuted, we talked about this group of churches is persecuted particularly by the government and also like Jewish folks too as well. But we use this same kind of imagery when we want to talk about God's sovereignty. We'll say something like, hey, things are bad, but God is still on his throne. And this is like a similar message that's being given to the church, these 7 churches is, hey, listen, you're struggling. I want to encourage you to endure, but I want to also make sure that like the truest reality isn't your situation, that Caesar is in charge or Caesar is persecuting you, but that the truest reality, what you need your eyes open to see is that God is still on his throne, and that if Caesar is the octator, if he's mighty, God is panoctator, God is almighty. So this vision of a throne, it's no accident that this is like the first image that, hey, the powers of this world are coming against believers, but look at God's throne and look at the power he has and the power he's exhibiting. And this majestic image we have here is meant to open their eyes and broaden their perspective, because their perspective is focused on probably their sufferings, and that they think, man, we cannot overcome this. But if you open your eyes, see, well, God's on his throne and God's in control. That's I think part of why this is this foundational image in Revelation. So we have these 24 elders, we have these 4 living creatures, and then picking up in verse 9, and they're singing that song. And whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who is seated on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who is seated on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. They cast their crowns before the throne, saying, worthy are you, O Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power. For you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created. So we see, and like I said before, worship is a theme throughout these chapters. And another reason why this idea of God being kind of above Caesar and above the powers of the earth would resonate, is because this is used in worship, right? And these are images that should cause us to worship, to join in with these creatures, with the elders, and worship. And they're singing the song, worthy are you, Lord. And we're going to see a similar song come up here soon. So we're jumping into chapter 5. So that's kind of the setting. 24 elders, 4 living creatures, worshiping God, worshiping him who's on the throne. And let's start into chapter 5. Then I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll, written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the scroll and break the seals? And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. And I began to weep loudly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. Okay, so we have the scene set, and then what happens is him who's seated on the throne has this scroll, and an angel asks, who's worthy to open the scroll and break the seals? So we're going to figure out a little bit from context what we're seeing here by who is able to open the scroll, but and what comes out of these scrolls too. So spoiler, Jesus is the one who can open the scroll. And what ends up happening out of these scrolls is that we see the judgments of God against evil and the ways that he is restoring creation and vindicating his people. So this idea of the scroll here, I think is best understood to be God's redemptive plan. So one scholar, I like how he puts it, he says, God's plan to defeat evil, to rescue his people, and transform creation. It's God's big plan for creation. Defeat evil, rescue his people, transform creation. And the image here is that whoever can open the scroll is the one that can bring about this plan of God, and no one is found worthy. And John begins to weep because no one is worthy to do this, to bring about God's plan. And then we see in chapter 5, or in verse 5, some good news. So 5:5. And one of the elders said to me, "Weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals." So great news. Don't weep anymore. The Lion of the tribe of Judah has conquered. So we're now expecting, if you're reading this right, we're going to see this lion, and we're going to hear about how this lion is conquered. But look what happens in verse 6. And between the throne and the 4 living creatures, and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing as if it had been slain, with 7 horns and with 7 eyes, which are 7 spirits of God sent out to the earth. So this is between the throne and the 4 living creatures, among the elders, right? Among the church, again, we see between the throne. It's a lamb who's standing as if it had been slain. All right. So we see it at other points of Revelation too. These times when John will hear something, and then he'll look and he'll see, and it kind of is something different, or it's something that, in this case and later, something that sheds more light on what he heard. So in this case, the Lion of the tribe of Judah has conquered, but he looks and it's a lamb who was slain. So this idea here is that Jesus has conquered, right? He's conquered sin. He can bring about God's plan for redemption, but he's not conquering in the way that we would expect him to conquer. How does Jesus conquer? It's through self-sacrifice. It's through the giving of his life, through laying down his life. So the countercultural kind of crux here is that the Lion of the tribe of Judah is a slain lamb, that the one who conquers, and the way that Jesus conquers is through self-sacrificial love. So we sing the song in church, the Lion and the Lamb, and that's not saying that, it's not saying that Jesus has these lion-like qualities and these lamb-like qualities, and that those are kind of played against each other, but it's saying that the way Jesus conquers, the way Jesus is a lion, the way he conquers is through self-sacrificial love and through the giving of his own life. And later we're going to see that the church and the people that follow the Lamb wherever he goes, and the people that exhibit those lamb-like qualities. So you also eat 7 horns, 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits. So again, we see also in the Lamb the fullness of the Spirit, like we discussed earlier with the 7 spirits before the throne. So what does the Lamb do? And this Lamb that was slain, in verse 7, he says, "And he went and he took the scroll from the right hand of him who was seated on the throne. And when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song." So Jesus takes the scroll, the Lamb takes the scroll. And we begin, and the elders and the living creatures begin to worship. And this is the song they sing. "Worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals. For you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God, from every tribe and language and people and nation. And you have made them a kingdom and priests of our God, and they shall reign on the earth." So another reason why, one of the reasons I think that 24 elders is pointing to like priesthood type language and believers as a priest is because right here, that what Jesus' sacrifice does, he's ransomed people for God from every tribe and nation. We're going to see more of that in chapter 7. This book, Revelation, is this very inclusive book, and it's saying, that the church, it's this big capital C church picture of people from all around the world who are believers. So what Christ has done is he's ransomed his people, but he's also given us a purpose, that we've been made kingdom of priests. So then in verse 11, "Then I looked and I heard around the throne and the living creatures and the elders the voice of many angels, numbering myriads and myriads and thousands, saying a loud voice." So we have more worship coming here, and here's this other song. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing. So what's cool about this, really similar, this in verse 12, 5:12, if you look at the song there and the song in 4:11, remember last chapter was just Yahweh on the throne, God on the throne. And there's a really similar song that's sung about Yahweh and the Lamb, which is just like in chapter 1 when we saw these titles that are used for God and used for Jesus are, and interconnected, and they're kind of the same. And it's the suggestion that, right, this Jesus person, this Lamb, is equal with God. So like if you compare 4:11 with 5:12, really similar songs. And then we get even more explicit. So we'll wrap up the chapter now in verse 13. And I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea and all that is in them saying, so now every creature is singing this song. To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever. And the four living creatures said, Amen. And the elders fell down and worshiped. So it kind of builds where there in verse 12, there's like this implicit connection where, hey, this song is really similar to the song sung about God. Perhaps this Lamb is kind of equal with God. But then the image you get, the last song you hear is to him who's on the throne and to the Lamb. So the Lamb is worshipped alongside God. And just remember, right, Jewish people reading this at the time would be flabbergasted to put anyone equal with Yahweh. But that's the image. So that's more of this, what we're kind of saying is high Christology in Revelation. Right, this early Christian literature that is putting Jesus as equal with God. Though many skeptical scholars are gonna say that Jesus was elevated to a place of equal with God way later by people who weren't his followers. This book is written before the end of the first century. I mean, we're already seeing, pretty much from the beginning, Jesus worshipped as God. So that's the end. That's chapter 4 and 5. So you have this image of Yahweh on his throne, and then you have the one who's going to bring about Yahweh's plan is a Lion of the tribe of Judah, who happens to conquer not as a warlord slashing of his enemies, but as a sacrificed, slain lamb. And then they're worshipped together. So what happens now is this scroll is open, and we're going to see these judgments, and we're going to see this plan of God, this redemption of God carried out in the next few chapters. But that's chapter 4 and 5. Looking forward to next week. Next week, we're going to do even more than 2 chapters and try to really knock out a lot as it relates to those scrolls and different judgments that God doles out. Kind of some repetition there, so we can move through that pretty quickly. But appreciate you guys' time, and see you next time.